welcome back to those of you that have been with us since we started this morning when we had the conversation about boom and where supersonic air transport is going. And I'm delighted that we're going to have on the platform with us now two people who are involved in developing aircraft in the supersonic sector and to see where they're going and what the challenges have been. I'd like to start off by working on my first side here is Ernie Edwards, who is the Chief Commercial Officer of Aerion, and next to him, Vic Kachoria, who is with Spike Aerospace. So please welcome them onto the stage. So gentlemen, a lot of excitement about supersonic, and yet, as was pointed out this morning, I mean, it's gone back to 1969, so it's nothing new, it's just not happened since. So what makes us really believe it's going to happen this time? Ernie, if I can start with you, tell us where you are with Aerion and how you feel that the supersonic business could go.
Is this mic good?
Yep.
Is it coming through? Well, Aerion is a company that started about 16 years ago through the sponsorship of a Texas-based entrepreneur by the name of Robert Batt. Being an aircraft user for most of his working career, he's felt for quite some time that the world and the business world would benefit from supersonic transportation. So over the last decade and a bit, we've been the design of the airplane, which in great part is helped by selecting an engine. And that, frankly, has been the holy grail of the whole mission, is finding an engine that can propel an airplane in today's rules and regulations environment that can comply with rules and regulations that exist today but are about to get tighter in 2020. And we're there now. With the engine, we've selected the GE engine that's in commercial use today with the airliners. The engine collectively across the fleet of airplanes has over 1 billion hours of safe flying. And GE are analyzing that engine to see what they need to do to that engine to modify it for our requirement. Our requirement is to take the airplane 4,200 nautical miles at a supersonic speed of 1.4 Mach. And we should be getting the results of those analyses in the short term.
Vic, I'm hoping you're still being heard there, so if I can move on to you there, because you came in much later, I think, than Aerion had already been talking about. What's different with what you're doing and how did you get into it?
I've actually been exploring aviation opportunities in supersonic flight for quite some time, actually going back to early 2000s, looking at what it would take to have supersonic flight, what the barriers are, what the market wants, what customers want. I've spent a lot of time talking to them. As we talked earlier, the Concorde went out of service in 2003. I was tremendously disappointed. As a child, I would always watch the Concorde fly, pictures of it, thought it's incredibly glamorous, a luxurious aircraft, and I imagined I'd be living that lifestyle, be hopping on a flight to Paris and getting a croissant on a Sunday morning and flying back for dinner. Isn't that what we all wanted, back then? Now that I'm flying for business a lot, I travel huge distance across to Shanghai, to Geneva and back, and it's tremendously long distance. I'd love to be able to do it faster. And that's a motivation I think we all understand. If we do a lot of international flying, we need to get somewhere faster. We need to do our business, go on to the next place or return home.
Yep.
This is a tremendously exciting period in our company's evolution. We've gone through from a concept of a vision, an idea like how this would be really cool, to a concept to engineering, and we've actually had a flying prototype, a scaled model of our aircraft that demonstrates the platform that we have, the design that we have. It's tremendously exciting to see. We learned a lot. Now we're getting ready to fly the next one towards the end of the fall. So this is really the most exciting time of our company's career.
One of the biggest challenges, I think, is funding. And I know, Vic, you said you don't like the phrase startups, and I guess it's exactly the same with Aerion, isn't it, really?
Yes.
But if we look at the industry, it's not something that's coming out of one of the big production houses. It's not a Lockheed Martin, it's not a Boeing and so on. It's a private idea, it's entrepreneurs, it's innovators that are coming now. The challenges to that must be funding. Now, you started off with a billionaire who's probably going to be a millionaire by the time you get it flying. What did you do? How did you get the money to even get you going? And are you going to have enough money to take it through to certification?
I am a super geek. I love technology, and I started off doing antiparticles, maglev trains. I would be doing triple integrals while everybody else was getting a beer and going on dates. So I love the technology. I also have a fair bit of experience in business. I've launched several companies, I've built them, made a tremendous amount of money there, and I've self-funded some of it. We also have some investors at this stage, and we're moving forward with larger investors. We're talking to several individuals that are interested in funding a substantial portion of our operations. So I'm quite comfortable with where we are, our funding level today, and where we will be in the future. That will have it to take it all the way through certification and delivery.
Okay, and Ernie, we saw with Aerion, there was a number of years while it was in still a sort of concept idea, but the program, as you said, with GE giving you an engine, Lockheed Martin coming in with some advice, you had Airbus involved at an earlier stage. How much has that changed now you've got, if you like, the credibility of having some of the established players getting involved?
Well, yeah, The program has been going so long because it's not easy. In fact, I think it was Blake Scholl last week quoted that it's hard, and it is hard. It's the single reason why it hasn't been done until now. Concorde back in the 60s took 10 years and 2 governments to bring the aircraft to market. It was a job creation enterprise to begin with, and it's sad that Concorde eventually failed. It just wasn't economical anymore. But today, the challenge is to bring an aircraft to market under this environmental regulations that are needed. It's trying to find an engine. It's trying to find the money, what I call the four-legged stool. You have an engine, you have an airframer, somebody that can build the airplane for you, with you. You have sales, which you need, and you also need the money. And it's a four-legged stool that you put together. That you don't want any of the legs coming off. And we're just about there now. As soon as we get the engine sorted out by not too far from now, I think we'll be ready to make a definitive announcement on the engine and sign the final agreements with GE. And we have Lockheed as a supporter, as a manufacturer who's built more supersonic airplanes than anybody in the world. So we feel very confident we'll bring this aircraft to market, and it'll be worth waiting for, because I think that's just going to be the first step to going faster and going further. We've been trying to go faster and further since Wilbur and Orville Wright had the first flight. And there were people back in those days who said it was not going to happen. There were dissenters then, said we don't need airplanes, and we've come a long way since.
Okay. And you've got it's a tri-jet, the 3-engine.
It's a 3-engine jet, yes.
And yeah. Can you just give us an idea of the size? Because I think Blake was talking about, 50 to 60 passengers as a commercial air transport venture. He's democratized it. We're going to be able to, if you can fly business class, you can fly supersonic with Boom.
Yeah.
With Aerion, are you looking purely at a business aviation, so it is the VVIPs of the world? How will that compare to flying in a Global or a Gulfstream? And how many people will you take? And finally, when you talked about Aerion before, there was talk about it could stretch once you can actually get it built. Do you have a vision for that as a commercial proposition as well?
Gosh, at my age, I hope I can remember all those questions, but I'll try and answer them. First of all, I think the 3-engine concept that we have helps for ETOPS, which is extended operations over water. We eliminate the requirement to be within 180 miles of land, which enables us to fly more directly across some of the water routes that exist in the world today. I think what was the other question, please, Alan? Can you remember?
The target of VIPs as a private.
Yeah. Thank you. I remember that. Thank you. VIPs over the commercial airliners. I think if the airlines were crying out for supersonic transportation, there are some pretty mighty companies out there that could build this airplane. Boeing and Airbus, just to mention two. But I don't think those airline manufacturers yet see crying need from the airlines for this airplane. We've elected to go the business jet way because we think this is the lowest risk to entry into service, because the ultra-high net worth individuals aren't as sensitive as the airlines are or the airline passengers are on a seat per cost mile basis. And I think that's proving true. We have an order from FlexJet, arguably the second largest fractional ownership company in the US, for 20 airplanes already. So we're on our way to building a good order backlog.
Okay. Vic, can you tell us about Spike? Where do you see yours going? Because again, you came in initially as a business aircraft. Do you still see that? And what do you see it moving to?
You're right, Alan. When we first started off, we were looking at this as a private business jet that would be used by ultra-wealthy individuals on their to manage their operations globally, to go visit plants, recruit people, talk to customers, do investments. As we look at the market, I think that still is probably the early adopters that are going to be very interested in supersonic flight. They have the interest, the means to adopt a supersonic flight in their personal lives and their operations. But as we continue looking at the market, about 2 months ago, I published a report that we had done internally showing the number of first-class, business-class passengers and the flight's route. It was kind of an analysis of the range and the total number of passengers that would be interested in supersonic flight. It's a substantial number. So you got, I think, 6 or 7 buckets of passengers. You got private individuals, the billionaires in the world. You have corporate flight departments, the IBMs of the world that want to fly, or the motor companies that need to manage their operations. You have fractional owners, fractional operators that will operate to their services, and airlines that will operate as an upgrade from economy and business and first class to supersonic class. I think there's multiple markets. There's a question as we talk to our customers, airlines and others, what is that size of that aircraft that they're looking at? 18 passengers that we're looking at as our private jet is a tremendous opportunity. It doesn't cannibalize their existing aircraft, which is critically important. You don't want to cannibalize existing routes. You want to be able to offer them an opportunity to fill their seats, fly capacity, and make a substantial profit at that. So,
okay, but the cost of entry into that, I mean, what sort of price? What's the price point for these aircraft? If I start with,
well, the Aerion AS2 is going to be sold at 120 million a copy, which, according to market analysis that we've been doing over the last 13 years, we've been doing analysis roughly every 2 or 3 years, consistently has come back and told us that there's not an objection to the 120 million. Many years ago, I can remember one of our competitive, subsonic competitive airplanes selling for $25 million, and people thought that was an extraordinary amount of money. We know today the super rich buy mega yachts that are $350 million. So at $120 million, we think the time savings that we would be able to afford, let's say 2.5 hours across the Atlantic. I recently flew, when I saw you in Abu Dhabi, from Miami to Abu Dhabi was the trip I made. If I'd have been in an AS2, I would have saved 4.5 hours of flight time. Those are meaningful. They're meaningful to me at my level, but imagine the ultra-rich who want to get to a mission, hold a business meeting, and then return, if not the same day, the next day, refreshed. It's meaningful for those people.
And Vic, where do you see the price for Spike?
You know, there's a lot of ways to look at price. You can look at the cost of the aircraft, the acquisition of 120 million, which is about where we will be. We've looked at, which there's been no objection to that from the billionaires, ultra wealthy. That's the price point they can justify. They're already spending $67 million on a G650. So to go 50% faster, save 50% time, spending $120 million is quite justified. Yeah. Where the challenge becomes is, what is the fuel cost? How much more fuel are you burning? What is your total operating cost? And it's an interesting equation as you do it. You are absolutely burning more fuel. There's no doubt about that. But what you're doing is that you fly from New York, say, or London, to across the pond. You're not flying from Heathrow and going through the security channels and spending 2 hours in the airport. You're going right to the executive terminal. And from the executive terminal, you essentially just walk onto the plane and you fly to the equivalent airport in the US. And you walk right off, you're there. A 3-hour flight is really a 3.5 hours, is really about 3.5 hours. On an airline or supersonic aircraft, you still got to go through Heathrow, so you still got those 3 hours. You get there in 3 hours, but you still got the immigration on the other side. So it's a tremendous challenge. Ultra wealthy aren't concerned about it. Airlines are concerned about the cost, the total operating cost, and that's what we always keep in mind. I think the price tag that we're looking at is on a cost basis. The tickets will be about what a business class ticket costs currently. The airlines will likely charge a premium over that to make a substantial profit for the value it offers.
Yeah, because I think Blake said he was looking at 200 million per unit,
right?
Which the airlines so far seem to have been okay with. Operating costs are going to be expensive, I guess, compared to a subsonic. But I want to talk a little bit about the environment. And I think you're going to face the criticism straight away from people saying, the rich and famous, great, but they're burning up the Earth's resources just to be able to save 2 hours. And what's the sort of feeling about that? What are you doing about the environment? What's your fuel use like? How are you improving that kind of side of the operation?
Well, I think it's environmentally necessary for we manufacturers, whether we are new manufacturers as we on the stage are proposing or existing manufacturers, are sensitive to the environmental issues that go on around our globe today. But the fact is, for all of aviation, whether it's jumbo jets, Airbus 380s, or a little piston twin, aviation as a whole contributes about 2% to the carbon emissions on an annual basis. Our end of the business, the supersonic jet, at least Aerion, let's say, over the next 10 years with 300 airplanes in service, our contribution to carbon emissions is 0.02%. I'm sorry, 0.06% of that 2%. So it's hardly an impact. But at the same time, the engine that we're bringing into service will also be able to use biofuels. And some may not be aware, but biofuels are in existence today. United Airlines, for example, operates out of one particular airport in the United States using biofuels only. The real issue today with biofuels is the distribution the distribution way. So Jet A1 is tankered backwards and forwards. We don't have the same distribution facilities available to us yet on biofuels. Our airplane is 7 years away from entering into service. We fully expect that biofuels will be more readily available at more airports at that time. So all of the manufacturers are looking in that direction for sure.
Okay. Vic, what about the environmental concerns where you're concerned?
I think environmental concern is critical to consider in development of any technology product. I think it's absolutely irresponsible to consider advancing technology or transportation with a detrimental impact on the environment, or the people around you, and other communities. And it's never going to pass. There's going to be so much outcry, and reasonably so. It should be. And so our responsibility as manufacturers to ensure the products we develop to go faster is responsible. The question always is, how much more damage are we creating? Is that tolerable? Who's measuring that? How do we measure that? Lots of different ways to measure. There's the emissions that we're talking about, the CO2 emissions, nitrous oxide issues. There's engine noise around a community. There's a sonic boom. All of these are important considerations. We don't want to disturb people on the ground. We don't want to disturb migrating birds or fish. We don't want to have high engine noise on takeoff and landings that we're going to disturb the community around us. There's a lot of restrictions, and they're getting tighter. So I think Spike and I believe Aerion, we're both working very responsibly in mitigating those as much as we can. We're working with the engine companies to also mitigate the emissions. Already engines are 25% more efficient and less emissions than they were in the 747 days. So tremendous advances have happened.
Let's pick up on the noise and specifically the boom. That's always been the challenge as far as the outside world sees. How are you mitigating the boom challenge?
Well, if I may just take 30 seconds to explain how boom, the sonic boom, is created on the ground for those who don't understand. That's as a result of a shock wave of the air mass hitting the leading edge of the wing and finding its way down to the ground. You hear the sonic boom when the shockwave hits the ground. Our design has got a very thin wing, and the concept there is to minimize the shockwave when it hits the leading edge of the airplane. So if you're minimizing the shockwave, you're reducing the chance of the shockwave eventually hitting the ground. So a combination of minimizing the shockwave, the altitude that the airplane flies at, and atmospheric conditions at those altitudes all contribute to minimizing the shockwave. We believe that we're able to minimize the shockwave and enable us to fly up to Mach 1.2, the speed of sound, without creating a shockwave, or without the shockwave hitting the ground, I should say. And I think we're going to be there. The issue is going to be the fundamental need to change the rules.
Yes.
The rules that exist in the States today that were created as a result of noise objections following Concorde was that there'll be no supersonic flight across the contiguous United States. End of story. If you're not a military aircraft, you can't fly supersonically. The rest of the world says, ICAO says, that you shall not create a disturbance on the ground, there shall not be a disturbance on the ground created by supersonic flight. So the rules are slightly different. Our business model isn't based on the rules being changed, but I can tell you now that all the OEMs, Spike, Boom, ourselves, the other manufacturers, Gulfstream, Boeing, Airbus, all of us now are meeting on a regular basis with the FAA, who of course are talking to the European counterparts here to start the rule change, because I think we all realize this is an inevitability that's going to come. We as humans have always wanted to get from A to B faster.
We had the administrator of the FAA on here yesterday who
Yes.
is quite confident he's going to see supersonic travel in his lifetime.
Glad to hear it.
But he wasn't quite so confident about getting rid of the noise over land. I mean, do you think we are going to see a change that will enable you to fly supersonic across the world?
So I think it's an important distinction that we make about the FAA versus ICAO. From the very beginning, we realized the FAA changing their regulation would be a very long-term process, 10 to 15 years, with the number of environmental studies they were going to require, the acts of Congress that would have to be worked through. So our business strategy has always been to focus on the European, Middle East, and Asian market. And in order to fly from London to Dubai or to Hong Kong, you absolutely have to have a low sonic boom. That was a requirement from day one, that we were going to fly from New York to London, sure, transoceanic, but our key market really is transcontinental. So from the very beginning, we hired 2 engineers from Boeing that had worked on the Sonic Cruiser and the original SST. They had tremendous experience in hypersonic, supersonic flight, and sonic boom, how to mitigate that. Our current wing design, our plan form that's shown publicly, there's some variations on that in the actual design, but it's a highly swept wing that has a tremendous impact on the sonic boom, a tremendous reduction. There are trade-offs, as there are trade-offs with any design, and in our case, our sonic boom was a critical aspect to be able to reduce that so we could fly from London across the continent. So I think it's going to happen. It's the timing of when the U.S. regulations will be modified so we can fly from New York to L.A., but there's certainly a large enough market to go the rest of the world.
You know, Alan, I'd like to add to the comment, because, and I don't want to take on the FAA. Don't get me wrong, nobody wants to get on the wrong side of the FAA. But having said that, the U.S. government, NASA has just awarded the second $250 million contract, actually to our partner on a separate contract at Lockheed, to develop what they call QUEST, which is quiet supersonic flight. So I think the U.S. government at least are investing in what we're talking about here, which is the reduction, if not the elimination of sonic boom. Will it go away entirely? We'll see. But certainly there's technologies available to minimize it now.
And as they're working on that technology with Lockheed, do you see Aerion adopting that if it's working, kind of back to the drawing board and changing what you're doing?
Well, that study that Lockheed was awarded the $250 million contract is a government contract, and all the manufacturers will have availability to the results of that study. It's not exclusive to us. It's funded by taxpayers' money. It will be available to everybody. Will we make use of it? Quite possibly, but there's still a couple of years to run before that money is spent and the analysis comes out. We'll have to wait and see on that.
Can we take any questions, please?
Oh, it's an easy crowd.
One here, lovely.
Hi, Vic. This is for you. The prototype.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Hey, Vic. This is for you. The prototype that you guys were flying, did you go supersonic, or how fast did you go in the prototype that you said that you were flying? And would it technically sat 18 or your capacity of the prototype?
Yep. Good question. So last October 2017, we flew a subscale model of the aircraft, unmanned vehicle, no passengers, no pilots, and it was flying subsonic, not supersonic, a very low subsonic at that. And what the intent was just to simply verify the aerodynamics that we had created. We've done wind tunnel test model, we've done computer simulation. But there's a reality this is more real. When you're actually seeing it fly, you built it, you understand a lot. We learned a lot in the process. There were a couple of issues that we need to tweak. And for very low cost, very quickly, we were able to do that. And as I mentioned earlier, later this fall, we'll fly another aircraft, larger, faster.
And would that aircraft technically be would seat 18
Nope.
maybe passengers?
No, we're still going to be subscale for probably at least another year. End of 2019, we'll have a supersonic demonstrator, which will also be unmanned.
Sure.
And then we'll go on to the manned after that.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Ernie, can I just ask, do you see putting a test model, an unmanned scaled model, into your program? Is that happening?
No, that's not the path that Aerion is pursuing. Aerion have 43 patents that we've registered with the U.S. Patent Authority. 13 or 14 of those are on airframe structure. The rest are on computer technology that enables us to do much of our analysis, such as Vic is talking about, much of our analysis on computers before we finally put a real scale model into the wind tunnel test. That's the path that we're pursuing, not the mock-up that Vic is suggesting. And I think it's fair to say, we each have our own methods of getting to the goal that we want to reach. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying one is more right than the other, but that's the path that we pursue.
Okay. Any other questions at the moment? That's all. Nope. I'm going to come back onto regulation then, if I can, please, because one of the, or not so much regulation as certification. As Neil, who was speaking earlier, was saying, even if you're looking at the smallest of light aircraft, to get it certified is a nightmare. It's going to cost a lot more than you ever expect. There's all the little parts have to be bothered. Your target at 2025 still sounds slightly ambitious to get through certification without a test aircraft already being built. How confident are you about certification?
Well, our schedule is calling for 5 years from now, roughly to first flight, and then 2 years of certification flights. We're not creating anything new within the airplane. The systems are existing systems. There may be some advancements on avionics that are still yet to be developed and found, but certainly avionics grows annually. But the technology within the airplane itself is existing technology. The change is we have a different design. We're going supersonic. We're a totally carbon fiber airplane. I remember one of your earlier questions was about the airplane heating up and expanding like the Concorde used to do. Carbon composite materials don't get heat, they don't get hot, they don't expand. And that technology exists today. The Airbus 350 is a composite airplane. The Boeing 787 is a composite airplane. So that is no longer new. It's manufacturable, it's available. So what it boils down to then is supersonic flight itself. So while I can understand it may look a bit risky, both Airbus, who helped us in the past couple of years, and now Lockheed, who've already done a study on our designs, are advising us that 2 years is doable from first flight. We'll have 5 test articles in the certification campaign. 4 of them will eventually be delivered to customers. 1 will remain at the factory, which will be the oldest airplane in the fleet. But it's doable, yes.
Great. Vic, how do you see certification challenge?
Certification is probably the most expensive, most complex, and the longest part of this aircraft design. Engineering is challenging. I think certification is order of magnitude more challenging. Not only you got certification and testing requirements in the United States, but you also have to convince all the other aircraft authorities around the world that your aircraft is safe to operate and meets their requirements. Tremendous amounts of dollars we've allocated to that requirement. We expect that it's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars just to test and certify the aircraft. Ariane's looking at 5 test aircraft, as you said. We're looking at 4 with several thousand hours of testing. So we have that budget in. We know that's going to be part of the program development cost. Building an aircraft is very cost intensive, capital intensive, so we're prepared for that.
But I could just imagine the nervousness within the FAA of the poor guy in the the airworthiness and certification area who's going to pick up this one and say, oh, right, this is, I mean, it is still new. I know you say you look at it, the technologies are being used, the materials are being used, but you still put, that's the same if you're building a new Piper. It's still the same stuff, but it can still take a long, long time, and the problems that
Alan, if I can add to that, I think that's one of the challenges that the FAA or any regulatory body has. What regulator wants to sign off on an aircraft saying, yeah, this is safe, and then have it kill people or damage property? I think everybody would prefer to err on the safe side of safety and say, yeah, let's test it some more, let's do some more. And that's where the cost, we've become very risk adverse, as we should, but that has a tremendous cost element to it.
I agree.
There's a question over here, please.
How do you gentlemen think about speed? Boom says Mach 2.2. You are somewhat less, I believe.
Is somewhat fast?
Where you fly slower.
Oh,
than,
I see. From Ariane's perspective, and physics are physics. We're not creating new physics. It's been around since the birth of the universe. Physics haven't changed. Each of these Mach 1, Mach 1.5, Mach 2, each of those have got a different set of issues that need to be resolved. Each of those barriers, whether it's 1, 1.5 or 2 Mach, require more thrust. It's as simple as that. You need more thrust to push an airplane through the atmosphere. The heavier the airplane is, the more thrust you need. If you go back to the Concorde days, 4 Olympus engines with afterburners just to get the airplane off the ground. Only military aircraft today have afterburners. The airport authorities, the FAA, EASA, will not allow afterburners on civilian transports. So we're not going to have afterburners, we're not going to have leading edge devices. And we're not going to go 1.5 or Mach 2 yet. We think over a period of time, the AS2 has a room to grow, and we will grow, but it will require new technology with the engines. Today, I don't believe that the technology exists today to take an airplane through at least 2 Mach. That's a lot of thrust.
So Boob's saying that Blake's saying he believes 2.2, using existing engines, so nothing new on this first model. Are you saying you're a bit cautious on that?
No, I'm not arguing with Boom. I'm saying our position is we haven't found an engine. We struggled for 10 years to find the engine that we do have. They're not growing off a tree. You need to dig very, very deep to find the engines. And we found the best engine that we can today, that is in service today, that can be adapted for what we need, do it economically. Even this engine is going to cost us $1 billion to develop. Do it economically, do it safely, and bring it to market in a timely manner. Is there an engine there that will go 2 Mach? We haven't seen it, if it is there.
Okay, we've had on FinTV the interviews with people like Reaction Engines who are talking about hypersonic potential. Do you embrace that idea? Do you see model number 4 or something moving on to being able to do that and doing Mach 5?
Yeah, absolutely. This supersonic flight, we're looking at flying Mach 1.6, a fair bit slower than the boom aircraft. But the reason we picked that is several reasons. It's the fuel burn, it's the engine availability, it's also the sonic boom. We found that Mach 1.6 was a sweet spot. Much faster than that, has a tremendous impact on drag, has a tremendous impact on sonic boom. Much slower than that, you're not providing enough value to your customer for the $120 million they're going to spend on the aircraft. So there's a point where you have to provide an economic benefit. You have to be able to do it with the technological products available today. But this is the beginning, as you're saying. The reaction engine, Supersonic at the beginning, we want to do point-to-point eventually. So hypersonic point-to-point. Who knows, in 100 years, we'll be in orbit. But let's start with this aircraft.
And we look forward to the
Alan, just following on from Vic, I think it's positive that people are talking about hypersonic.
Yes.
Is it realistic in the next 30 years? We don't know. But it just strengthens the story that the need for speed exists. And if that's a 30-year goal, so be it.
Yes.
Great. And I'm really sorry, but we have run out of time now. But thank you all very, very much. And please show your appreciation, please, to Ernie and Vic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.